So welcome back to the Sean Trey Show. I have a returning guest who's really awesome. Now, Tim, welcome back, man. How you doing?
Thanks. Yeah, I'm good. Been a busy week. It's good. Part 2.
Nice. What were you up to this week?
I was mixing this week, so
Nice.
I'm finishing an EP with an artist. Her name is Liz Kate, and she's an actress and a songwriter, and she was in a film recently out called Dear Evan Hansen, which is a really, I guess, a pretty cool film. It's gotten mixed reviews, but, you know, the fans love it kind of thing. Really
Nice.
kind of like a coming of age, teenage angst kind of thing. But she's a great actress and she's a great singer. And I've been mixing her EP, and it's just, you know, it's 5 songs, trying to get it done by Monday. So it's been full days. So it's been good,
Wow,
but it's been good. But it's been busy, so I'm a little underwater.
I'd been working really hard to get a music video out for my wife, and we shot it Wednesday. From when I shot it, I texted you about something, and then I literally just disappeared into that project, and it was like from after we shot it on Wednesday, 12 noon, I started going into production. We got everything set up, we shot it, and then by Friday at 5 we posted. So it was like cutting, and getting the person who mixed it to kind of do a couple final tweaks, and it was just it was a marathon, but it's fun. I like that. I love that stuff.
Oh yeah, I mean, I'm happiest when I'm working. Well, that's not true.
Right.
I'm happy when I'm working, not maybe happiest, but I love it. I love it. You know, I love the fact that like I thought it was going to be 3 songs, and it ended up being 5, and I didn't realize the deadline was Monday until I got a text Thursday night. It's like, yeah, we really want to post this stuff by Monday, and I'm like, oh, okay. Whole different perspective on things now. So, but it was good. It's been great. So I'm just going to finish them up today. I got couple little fixes to do today, and then I'm on my way. That's good.
There you go. It was a we passed Halloween, and once we crossed that Halloween line, my house busted out the Christmas music. So it was
awesome.
I came in, and my wife is a vocalist who grew up, you know, with Mariah Carey and such. And so I was down editing, and suddenly I went upstairs, and All I Want for Christmas was on. All I Want for Christmas is on. And so I was like, I was talking to my daughter, and it was pretty funny. I was like, would you like some more Christmas music? So I went and I picked out, I had a couple. I love Christmas music, you know. And we had, I've got Elvis Presley's, you know, Christmas hits, Frank Sinatra, and all these. And I put on a couple Christmas things, and my daughter was like, thanks, Daddy. And she turned, she looked at me, and she's like, this isn't Mariah. I was like, no, it's not Mariah.
That Mariah is a classic, don't get me wrong.
Put on Mariah Carey's Christmas, Daddy. And I was like, yes, okay. So we listened to it about 40 times.
Right.
But you know, you would go ahead.
No, go ahead. I was just gonna say our house is we're all about Halloween. We're House Slytherin over here. If you're a Harry Potter fan, so.
I'm a huge Harry Potter fan.
Yeah, so
I want to come back. Tell me your story, but then I want to come back to that.
Well, I was just saying we're House Slytherin, so we're all about Halloween. So Halloween is our big. We're like, you know, the Nightmare Before Christmas kind of story. Like we live in Halloween land, and Christmas is like secondary to Halloween.
That's awesome.
But yeah, that's funny.
We do see, and the thing is, here in Vietnam, there's just not a big Halloween culture.
No, yeah,
and so. And not that there's a Christmas culture either, but like there's more people are kind of into Christmas because, you know, there's presents and stuff like that. Halloween is still kind of this under the radar thing. Kids like it, but it's not as big, you know. You can't go trick-or-treating and stuff like that. So it's tricky. But how did you guys become House Slytherin, not Hufflepuff or Ravenclaw or Gryffindor?
I mean, you know, so my wife, she's interesting lady, and so she's a big Harry Potter fan. I was never really a big Harry Potter fan until I met her, and she's like, I'm like, I don't know, Harry Potter, and she's like, no, you got to watch them. So we went to this website, and it's like a hardcore Harry Potter fan website. They take it very seriously. Like, it's not a joke. It's not like cute. It's like, we're Harry Potter fans. We want to know where you stand. So you literally take like a test. It's like a 25 question thing. And the questions, it's like a psychological kind of test. It's like, typical things like you're walking in the woods and, or like you're walking and there's two paths ahead of you. There's an open pasture, a beautiful sun. And then there's like a dark, scary, it's like kind of just like, it's pretty obvious which way it's going to go, but you pick which one you like. And so you do this 25. So, she took it and she's like, I'm Slytherin. She's like, you need to take it to find out what you are. And I was like, oh, okay. Like, I don't understand this until I saw the scene where they, they put the hat on and they pick the house. So I went and I did this, and I was like Slytherin as well. So I'm like, wow, we're House Slytherin, and our son. So funny. It's so funny. This morning we spent 30 minutes in the closet, sitting in the dark. I was just holding him, and he was just like talking and making sounds because he's 2. And every time I would turn the light on, he would like, no, turn the light off. So I'd turn the light off, and then I'd open up the door to let some light in. He's like, no, he's just shut the door. And I'm like, so you just want to sit in the dark in the closet? I was like, you are definitely House Slytherin.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so that's how we arrived at that. And it's true, though. I mean, it really is. I've always been, of that ilk, and definitely my wife is too.
That's awesome.
She's part of a group on Instagram called Goth Moms. So
that's awesome.
So she's that girl.
I think like I always like, I'm not Hufflepuff. That's not in any way, but I straddle the line between the other 3. Like there are things, I've always been the guy who like stands up for people who are getting picked on, because I was picked on. But like at the same time, I'm very cerebral, so that's like a Ravenclaw thing. But the moral relativity of Slytherin absolutely appeals to me.
Yeah, I know. I was a little put off by it. I was like, well, wait a minute, hold on. I don't want to be the bad guy. But then, as you journey through Harry Potter's story, by the time you get to the last film, he's actually the hero. He actually puts his life down. The Slytherin puts his life down for Harry. So I was like, that's cool. We could be heroic. I'm heroic. Dark, but heroic. I like that. That's cool. It's kind of vigilante. I don't know.
Hands down, the best.
I don't put a lot of stock into it. It's not my guiding light.
No, I hear you. But the best character in the series is Snape, hands down.
Mm-hmm.
Hands down, most interesting character. Harry's too predictable. Ron's worthless. But
it's funny. I told, this is what I was saying to my wife. I was like, funny. It's not a Harry Potter thing because of my age difference. Yeah. She's younger than I am. I'm like, in Star Wars, I was always very intrigued by Darth Vader and Han Solo's character. So not so much Luke and Leia, but I get it. I appreciate it, but those stormtroopers are hard to resist. Those things are cool.
Right. I feel you, man. I'm with you on that. I like it, and I think that was kind of the draw to Darth Vader, man. Yeah, it's all good. Well, we anyway. I can go down Star. No, I appreciate a good Star Wars conversation and Bible conversation. But we were talking about. I want to dive back into a little bit of that. I was telling you before we started that I was listening to some Barbra Streisand, and you had a really cool anecdote about that. I'd love to.
Yeah. So what I was saying is I use Barbra Streisand's as a reference a lot with bands that I'm working with in the studio and teaching them the subtlety of phrasing and how important it is to really to extend the phrase to the end of the bar line and take the listener right to the downbeat with what you're singing. And it takes breath and it takes control and it takes understanding the phrase and how to, kind of and then stick the landing, And so I use her as an example all the time on her, just how amazing she is at being able to do that, whether it's singing classical music, but I bring up the Barry Gibb record, it's called Guilty. I bring that up. And, cause it's such a great record. It's so well produced. It sounds amazing. And she just kills it. She just kills every vocal performance. It's just like, wow. And it's effortless, I'm sure she's put in the time, but at the point where she's singing now, it's effortless. It's like it's like watching a figure skater, and it's like finishing the move all the way to the end or, and just sticking the landing, you know? So it's really funny to talk to like a young rock band about sing like Barbra Streisand. You know, it's like, it's always a little, they're always like, I don't understand. I'm like, hold on, just listen. And they're like, Barbra Streisand. I'm like, just listen. Let's turn the lights down. Just listen to the way she's phrasing. She's incredible. You know, anyone can learn from it. So
that's awesome.
Yeah, it's great.
It's interesting. We were last week. We finished our podcast and then we kept talking. And I was like, why didn't I record? And there was a couple interesting anecdotes. I put some notes down. And the first one, there was a really interesting thing. We started talking about master classes, and you started asking me if I had watched them, and then you were telling me which of them were actually your favorite to watch. I'd love if you could bring that up a little bit more.
Yeah, so a friend of mine got that for me as a gift, and I think it's a great thing to gift people. So maybe I'll send you a subscription. Sweet, it's a great thing to gift people because it's not something that you would typically be like, I'm going to go spend whatever it is a month, say $60 a year, $100 a year for this podcast or whatever masterclass. But I got it as a gift, and I kind of, during COVID, I had some time on my hands, so I got into it and I started watching them, and they are incredible. It's so fun and affirming and inspiring and all of the things that you would talk about in your podcast there. And it's great to hear the people who are the masters and how they started.
The masters.
Yeah, really. I mean, you're talking like, Danny Elfman talking about film scoring, Herbie Hancock talking about jazz and performing on piano, and Steve Martin talking about comedy writing. It's like, it's really inspiring, and it's also really helps me because they have insecurities, and I'm like, if they can be insecure about their art and be constantly questioning whether what they're doing is good, and that's what makes them great is they're always striving and kind of Monday morning quarterbacking themselves, and I love that aspect of it, because that's what I do just kind of naturally, maybe to a default at times, but I think it's healthy in a way. And I read Steve Martin's book, Born Standing Up, which is, I recommend it for anyone. It's such a good read. It's easy. It's fun. The stories are amazing. And his introspection on where he was at each stage of his career and where he is now it's just amazing to watch. And so I find that really inspiring. The cooking ones we talked about, I really find those inspiring because I love the passion that these people have for making food, which is an art. When you talk to like the people, I don't even know their names. I should, but they've got like Wolfgang Puck, and then they've got the guy Dave Ramsey who yells at everybody.
Thomas Keller as well, or something like that.
Oh, they have a ton.
The French Laundry guy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's just great to hear them talk about the process of making food and what it means to them and how they're inspired by different things. And, my wife is a great cook, and she's opened my mind to the subtleties of things and, the difference, it's very similar to what I do, the difference between like this microphone compared to this microphone in this situation under these circumstances is the game changer, or this mic pre, or the person's, subtleties of singing to the bar line, like those are things that translate to cooking, or painting. You can watch the master classes on painting. It's just the parallels are all there, and it's just so fun and inspiring to watch. And I love to hear the stories about them, like, getting started. Like Herbie Hancock's got this great story with Miles Davis, where he's auditioning for the quintet, right? So he's in the new Miles Davis quintet, which was Herbie Hancock. I'm gonna get this wrong, but it was Tony Williams, Herbie Hancock, and Ron Carter. Maybe, I forget. I'll have to check. But they did like circles, smiles, all that. The quintet, the quintet that he put together to kind of like be his new sound. And so he's auditioning, and he goes in and he starts playing, and Miles stops him. And he's like, no. Miles with his, he's like, no. He just looks at me. He's like, no, come back. You need more butter. You need more butter. And Herbie's like, what? Like, I don't know what that means. What does that mean? And he's like, come back. He like kicks him out. So then he comes back and he plays with him again. He keeps telling him more butter, and he like took him forever to understand what that meant, and then he eventually got it. But it's great to hear those stories that he was like you never think like Herbie Hancock was never good enough. I mean, he seems like he was always great, you know, right. And he never struggled. He always just either had it or he didn't, and you know, so it's fun to hear that stuff because it puts everything in perspective, for me at least, you know. So,
oh, totally. I think that's, you know, like when we were talking about Barbra Streisand, like one of the things that, you know, it's like you had said like she put in her time, and it was like she like hit her 10,000 hours and eclipsed it. You know what I mean? And it's like that it just blew it away. But like we forget that even these greats had to put in that time, you know. And certainly there are sometimes there are people that are like just, you know, they get it right in the get-go. Oh, yeah. But the majority had to put in time, and they, you know, and they slogged away. And it was like interesting. Like I remember one story about this one guy that I you know, it's how many of these different people you'd hear, like you know, story about people in LA or world leaders. It's like who were waiting tables, and you know, like then they had this big break, you know, and, or you know, and like there was always these people, you know, I think it was Zach Galifianakis was living out of his car in LA before The Hangover, you know, and it's like, and it's different, but I mean, my point, it's still like, people come from somewhere, and it wasn't always easy for them, you know, and they had to get there in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah, I think that's just an important part to understand. Like for people, it's great perspective, and I try to share that with like younger artists that I'm working with. That like, you know, what you're doing now, like this band that I just work with, they're great. I mean, they're awesome guys, and they are literally down on Broadway in Nashville. For your listeners who know Nashville and they know Lower Broadway, it's like Austin. It's like, you know, you go up and down the streets and it's just club after club after club with live music. And these guys awesome. They're just cranking it out, and they do shifts like all day, like 4-hour shifts all day long. You know, they do like 10 to 2, 2 to 6, 6 to 10, 10 to 2 around the clock. Wow. So they always are down there, and they're constantly playing down there, and they're just, and I tell them, you know, they appreciate it, and I think they understand the importance of it, and they enjoy it, but they're also like, you know, it's not really what we want to be doing. I'm like, oh man, what else should you be doing? What else would you be doing? Right. You know, like this, you guys are getting so good. You're getting tighter. You're getting better. You're learning how to sing. You're learning how to perform. You're learning how to keep an audience. It's like, this is it, man. This is your school. That's your shed, you know, like go down there and shed it every night. And, I think they get it. Like, you know, I was like, this is cool. What are you talking about? Like, go down there, slug it out, you know, get better. Yeah. That's how you're going to do it. So.
And it's like, you learn by doing it, but more than, you know, than by, you know, it's like, there was this story about like these, this guy who wanted to learn this skill. It was like a Zen type of a story. And, you know, and he would sit there and go to the master, or sorry, I think I almost started quoting Karate Kid as like an ancient Zen story.
Okay, you can quote Karate Kid.
It's okay. Wax on,
wax out.
Yeah. But I mean, sometimes you don't realize that you're learning and getting schooled.
Yeah,
until it happens.
Absolutely, that's a great thing in Steve Martin's book that was really interesting, and I'm sure he crafted it in a way that was kind of the arc of the story. Is that all these stories of him as a kid growing up, working at Disneyland. He worked at like the magic shop. His first real love was to be a magician. And then, you know, then it kind of evolved, and then he was like a comedy writer, and then he did some stand up. But you start to realize how like all these little things in his life kind of added up to where he essentially, you know, launched his career, which was doing stand up. There was a lot of like gags involved with it. There was a lot of like music also involved in it. And then he, you know, kind of went to writing, and then he was on SNL, and it just like takes you through this journey, and you can really start to see like how each, you know, working at Disneyland and doing being a magician that's standing out there doing tricks for people that would come to Disneyland, like became part of his act later on. You know, I love stuff like that. I think it's great. It's just so cool.
Did you ever hear, like, I always reference this on my podcast, and it's like one of the things I still love is Steve Jobs' Stanford graduation speech. If you haven't watched that,
I haven't seen it.
It's really good. It's really good. There's this one point where he's talking about how so he went to college because I think it was a deal he made with his mom. Like, he would go to college, and he was just like doing whatever, you know. He wasn't really that invested, but he did decide to, one day he was walking across campus and he saw this flyer that was up, and it was a typography class, and so he took it. It was a font class, you know, like, let's go learn about type. And he took that class, and it was like this, you know, whatever, but it was a class that he really enjoyed, and he put some time in, and he got something out of it. But when they came back around years later and they were putting the first, you know, Apple computers together, he insisted that they have good fonts. And it was one of the things that he was like really adamant about, because he had taken this typography class, and he says it needs to look good. You know, it's not just about, it's not just about having a sound, you know, because at that time, the old Commodore 64, man, it was like the black with green, you know, and the fonts were horrible, you know, but yet that was the thing that Apple kind of spearheaded. And he says, we can trace back having nice fonts on computer directly to the fact that I took that class. Yeah. And at that time, there was a great Will Ferrell movie that, oh man, do you ever see that one where, like, it wasn't a standard comedy. It was, I can't remember the name right now, but someone was writing the story of his life, and you could hear the dictation. What was that?
I forget, but I watched that. That was
Stranger Than Fiction.
Yeah, Stranger Than Fiction. That's it.
And and there was a line in there, and she's like, one of the greatest lines is in writing is, little did he know. Mm-hmm. And like, because like, and like that comes back to, and it's so true, like the idea that if a character knew more of what was going to happen, they would take something more seriously. Like, oh my goodness, that was just one of the most important moments of my life. Yeah. You know, you don't realize it. Yeah.
It's all, I love that, because I try to keep that in front of me as well. It's like, you know, I also saw this thing several years ago where there was like this movie where this person was challenged to say yes to everything. And I really love that concept. Man. Yeah, was that it? I love that concept.
Jim Carrey's Yes Man.
Yeah, I don't remember the movie, but I just remember the concept of it being like, yeah, like how many times in your life do you like kind of preconceive a situation and you're kind of like, nah, I'm going to pass. And it's like, you don't know where that could have led you if you say yes. So I've been kind of thinking, you know, I've been doing that a lot, kind of in my reevaluation of where I'm going and what's going on in my world over the last year. And I just really have kind of tried to adopt that, where I'm just kind of like, yeah, let's just say yes to it and see what happens. And a lot of times I'll get, sorry about that. I should turn these notifications off. Sometimes I'll get a little overwhelmed.
I can't hear it. I can't hear it.
Oh, I thought it dinged on my computer. Anyway, sometimes you can get a little overwhelmed, you know, like the character in the film, but it's good. I love that process, you know, and it's like,
it forces you out of your comfort zone. My wife and I are looking at, one of the things that we want to do long term is to kind of like to branch out and to kind of get some roots back in the States. Mm-hmm. I like it here, but long term, you know, I want my daughter to be able to experience both cultures. You know, my dream would be able to be summers here. No, winters here, summers and you know, spring, summer, fall back in the States. You know, I know that doesn't work with the school year, and it's cold back there. But I kind of have been putting some feelers out and for me, it's a known thing. Coming back to the States is kind of, you know, I grew up there. Mm-hmm. For my wife, there's a whole lot of these, like, it's completely outside of her comfort zone. You know what I mean? And it's the idea of anything that she goes. And I have to say, if we do this eventually, you have to be willing to to say yes to stuff that you might not understand, you know, and because it's a whole new world. And this happened to me when I moved to Vietnam. When I came to Vietnam, like, man, there's opportunities that came up and I was like, well, I don't know about that, you know, but I tried it and it turned out well. But you have to be willing to, we live in a box, all of us. And, you know, that box is our safety zone, you know? Mm-hmm. And I think the best example and place you can see this is at coffee shops. Because when people go in and they order their coffee, you know, they've got the way they like it, you know. I worked for a grand 2.5 weeks at Starbucks. I didn't last long. I couldn't handle it. Yeah. You know why I couldn't handle it, though? Because it was, of every job I've ever had, it was hands down the most demanding. And do you know why? Because everyone wants their coffee the exact same way that it's always done. Mm-hmm. And I'm the new guy, and I don't, you know, that dude, that made it normally, he's got the special way he does the foam, and you know, and the way they pour it, and it's crazy. Like the morning rush at a Starbucks is insane. Is about, you know, any number of people, but like we had like 300 people a morning, 300 people that all had their coffee the way they liked their coffee. Yeah. 300 different cups of Joe, man. And you do the slightest variation on the amount of sugar or on this or that, people know. Mm-hmm. They know. They'll be like, this is not right. Wow. I know. It's amazing. We should give people credit, simply the ability to know that it's not the way that they normally have it. But I mean, we live in that box. And I think that coffee example is a perfect reference to, sometimes we're scared to try new stuff, you know?
Yeah, I try so hard not to get to do that. I had an artist approach me about producing a record for him, and just dead honest, like I did the music and I just did not, like I didn't get it. I'm like, I don't know that I understand your music. Like I can't hear it, you know, like that's what I always want to hear it first. And I did that, and I kind of felt bad. I was like, I don't think I'm the guy for this. Like I'm not connecting to these music. It's not saying that your songs are bad. I don't feel what they're supposed to be. You know, I don't know that I understand it. So like 6 months, he's like, okay, cool. Yeah, I get it. He didn't do anything. And then like 6 months went by, and then he called me and he's like, hey man, I just want to come over to your studio and just record some guitar vocal stuff. And so he had sent me these fully produced ideas that he had. And so maybe it was a distraction. But anyway, point being is I really wanted to help him, because I'm like, this is outside my comfort zone. Like I've never done a record like this before. I've never like done music like this before. And so he came over and he recorded guitar and vocal. And as they were stripped down, I was like, hey, you know what? We should do that record that you talked about. And he's like, really? And I was like, yeah. I was like, let's do it. Like, this is a challenge, but I think I really want to get my head around this. Like, I really want to be outside my comfort zone. Like, I know you want to do a lot of, your songs are quirky and a little off kilter and outside my comfort zone and outside my box. And I dig that. And let's do this, because this will be a challenge for me to try to create something that is like creating what you want, but me being able to get my head around it, you know? And so it took me a long time. I did a lot of like walking and running and just listening to his songs over and over and over again until they kind of just clicked. And then I was like, this is great. Like, I'm doing this record. This is completely outside of my comfort zone. You know, like we were doing like backwards. I mean, we were just doing all sorts of crazy stuff to like get these songs to kind of come to life. So it was good. I mean, it's great. I really admire people who can do that more regularly than I can. You know,
it's hard for me. It's hard for me too, man. I have a way I like to do things, and like, and I think it's like, but when I try to get out, like, so I was shooting this music video for my wife, and we're still coming out of COVID lockdown, and the people I normally would lean on, a lot of people in Vietnam went back to kind of the countryside. They kind of went back to their hometowns because they don't have to pay rent there. Right. And so it's still, there's just not a lot of the people I can lean on. And we're just trying to not have a ton of people coming in and out of our house, and we were shooting here, and I have kind of like a, like a backdrop, like a kind of a photo studio over on the other side of the house. That is, as you have a studio there for music, I have a studio for shooting, and it works. So I was doing everything. I was my camera guy. I was the lighting guy. I was doing everything. And I had one assistant, my daughter, who's 5 years old. And that was just because grandma wasn't feeling good that I had to give her some jobs so that she could. I credited her as the director because I told her to yell action and cut, which she did exceptionally well. So in the whole music video, if you look at the last slide and it's director, and that's my daughter's name.
Awesome.
My wife was like, I need a fan. Like a blowing fan to blow the hair. And I've got 2 cameras that I gotta run. I've gotta run the audio that we're recording to, and I've gotta watch my daughter, make sure she doesn't run into the shot. The dog's scratching at the door outside, and I'm just like, a fan? All right, let me go upstairs and get our fan. And it was one of those spinning fans where like the front of the fan also turns and it moves, it aims in different directions. I had to turn that off. Trying to aim it was actually not that easy, right? And finally got the thing blowing at her. And then my wife was like, now in the beginning of the song, I want the fan to be light, but I need you to turn the fan up when the song gets dramatic. And I'm just like, no problem. Well, so cameras are running. I'm checking focus, and I'm running a fan over here with my other hand. When I got into editing, it was 100% what was needed. So when I got to the editing phase, if we hadn't have had that hair moving, because what I did was this kind of this cinematic overlay. So I got some stock footage, and the stock footage was kind of creating an overlay. So her face was kind of superimposed on nature with, fog and wind blowing. And so there was movement in the picture. And as the winds and clouds were moving, her hair was moving. It was exactly what was needed. But if I hadn't have been willing to go, I wanted to tell her, we don't need that. Not because we didn't need it, but because it was easier for me. Mm-hmm. And that's the death of creativity, Mm-hmm. It's like, so I learned something, and my wife wants me to learn the fact that she's always right. And I said, I'm going to learn that I should pay attention more. She's like, I'm always right.
Yeah, I agree. I'm a big fan of that. I really try to resist that as well, that temptation to be like, no, let's not do that. Like, I'm really trying hard to be more like, sure, well, let's try it. Let's do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, you want to do that? Well, sure. Let's give it a shot.
You brought up a great example last week too, and I have to bring it up because it's totally tied into this exact topic, and it was the Led Zeppelin story.
Oh yeah.
It's exactly the same type of thing. Yeah.
Yeah, it is. It's funny because Glenn Johns has a book called Sound Man, which I love. Yeah. And so I was reading that, and there's a little passage in there about Glenn had just done the Zeppelin record. He just put, like, Led Zeppelin had just formed. They started playing, like, the story of Led Zeppelin is that they all kind of were playing in other bands around the area. And they got together and they went in the studio, and Glenn was engineering it and kind of producing them. And they basically recorded which became Led Zeppelin 1. And when he was done mixing it, he was really excited about it. And he was like, this is something. It's different, but there's something here. There's really something here. You could really feel it. Mm-hmm. And so he took it around and played it for some of the other artists that were more established that he was working with at the time. And he was putting together like this thing called Rock and Roll Circus for the Rolling Stones. And it was like this, I think it was like a live show that they were then going to record. I can't remember exactly the story, but he had suggested that, they include this band Led Zeppelin. So he played the record for Mick Jagger, and Mick was like, this rubbish. It's like, this is rubbish. It's terrible. This is terrible. Like, there was no value. Like, it wasn't even like, oh yeah, that's pretty cool. It was just like, just straight up like, this is terrible. There's no value in this. And then later he played it for who was the other person he played it for?
One of the Beatles, I think.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, it was.
George.
Yeah, it was.
George Harrison or Paul McCartney?
I think it was George Harrison. I was going to say Paul McCartney, but I think he played it for George Harrison. And it was. I have to look at the booking. Yeah, it was George Harrison. That's right. It's because they were working on a little some songs that he had written, and so he played it for them too. And he had this same thing. They both arrived at the same conclusion that it was like worthless and this is terrible and it's never gonna, because it wasn't typical. It was outside their comfort zone of what they were doing. And it's funny because he was right. And it was outside of Glenn's comfort zone as well, but he knew that there was something there and they were willing to try something different, do something different. So I just love the fact, like I always try to keep that in mind, is that just because you're doing something that people who are maybe doing something different that are having success don't understand, it doesn't mean it's not good. It's like even their opinion is still just an opinion based on what they think is relevant and what they are comfortable with. And so it's a great thing. I've like taken that little passage, I took a picture of it, and I kind of remind myself of it every now and then. It's like, don't let the bastards get you down. It's like keep fighting.
There was this great infographic that I saw, like things that were destroying music throughout history. And I come back, I talked about this a couple times. It's really interesting because like 14 something, it was like the violin. This evil instrument that is invented. It is destroying music. It will be the death of music. Then after that, it was the trumpet. This horrible sounding thing. And then after that, it became the piano. All of these instruments that we now see as like absolute, staples to the classical music, genre, were at some point in time a new instrument. And at some point in time, there was a huge resistance to it. There was this pushback of like, this is going to destroy our institutions. I can just imagine some priest there,
It's like when I was working with this artist that I wasn't like 100% sure with his music. His name's Tyler. He kind of pushed me in different directions, which was great because it was like we kind of ended up working together on this thing, and he had all these ideas of things that he was hearing in his head, and I was like, okay, well. Like, I don't know if I understand, like, what I don't understand. Like, is it this? Is it this? And we were experimenting with all these things. And it was great because at the final end result of the record, I was kind of like, when it was done, I was still kind of the same. I was like, I don't know. I don't know, maybe. But it was really well received. Like, the people who listened to it, loved it. And, like, I had people come up to me later and they're like, man, that Trubisky record that you did was great. Like, Tyler's record's awesome. I really dug it. Like, I loved all the things that you're doing on it. I was like, great. Like, wow, that's weird. I would not expected at all. Yeah. Well, no, actually I'm kind of like, it was really all him. Like, I'm just kind of like, okay, sure. Whatever you think. But, it was kind of, it was rewarding in that way, but also I was like surprised, I was really surprised. I was of the things that I'd done in that like block of time, that was the one that was like being really well received, which was completely counterintuitive to what I thought, which then makes me go, don't ever think because chances are you're going to be proven wrong. So it was kind of eye-opening for me, and I was like, okay, cool, awesome, good to know, noted.
This is the thing that because my background is in new media. And for a long time, I've worked running campaigns for people on their social media and helping people build their brands with videos and things like that. And the one thing that I realized, you never know what's going to hit. There is, and the people that I talk to that also are, do a ton of media, are like, man, you would like it if there was a secret sauce.
Oh, yeah.
That you go in and go, you hit this, you've got to hit. You don't know, man. Yeah. And like, I remember, so I was working with my friend Lena, and we were doing some videos, and at that time I was helping manage the social media for Christopher Heavechew, which, are you a Game of Thrones fan?
Oh, yeah.
Do you know Tormund Giantsbane?
Yeah.
All through the first early seasons, I was helping him manage his social media. So like, awesome. I was kind of helping coach them through that because I worked in conjunction, I was doing like contract work for his manager agent, who's my good friend Lena Sistad, and she's the owner of this agency in Denmark. Really cool lady. And so we were talking to him about, you guys got to be posting more. You know, you're so visible right now on this show. You got to get, you know, be visible with your social media. And because the fans, man, they were ravenous on his social media. And like, I was running the Facebook and he was doing his own Instagram, but I was helping with Facebook. And like, I would comment back to fans like, oh my God, is this you? And I was like, you got to come, you know, interact with these people or at least give them content. And so he was like, finally agreed to do it. And he did this beard commercial. He's like, I got this idea for this, not commercial, but like a YouTube video, you know, I've got this idea for an Instagram YouTube video. And so he goes to get a beard cut. A beard is beard trimmed. He walks in, and it's just shot on his iPhone, right? And he walks in and he pulls out one hair. They cut it. And he's like, perfect. And he walks out. Dude, it got so many views. Oh my gosh. And it was like, I think it had a couple million views, like in a couple days. It was insane, right? So they were like so excited. Everyone's like, yes, we now have the secret sauce. We're going to go and make more of these. So the next one, he went and granted, it was a little bit risque, but not really. So he goes and he gets, he's standing next to a horse. He's like, do you want to know the secret of a really great beard? And he's like, horse. He's got this fake jar.
Oh, Jesus.
He starts rubbing it, and it's really inappropriate. But like, you know, with the internet, like stuff like that you would think would hit, it bombed.
Yeah.
Horribly bombed. It horribly bombed. And like, you would think that even maybe some virality factor, but like, my thing is like, that first one had no production value. It was funny. It was quick. You know, cut the beard. The second one, people put time into, and people, you know, he scripted it, and there was like this time put in, and it bombed. You know, and so it's like, and this is something that I talk to with creators all the time. Like, you can spend all this time trying to think about what people will like, or you can create what you like, and just kind of work from there. Because if you spend all your time trying to think about what's going to be the thing that hits, you might strike out because you're spending so much time. Because like you said, if you had played it safe with that other album, you know, it wouldn't have been the same. I don't know. Yeah,
it definitely wouldn't have been a representation of him as an artist, which would have been like, it would have misfired, I think, because of that. You know, I think it would have. It's if it's not a representation of what he does, then it's missing already. So, yeah, it was a learning experience. It was definitely like there were times where I just would sit there and I would like listen to the tracks, and I'm like, okay, here we go. Like, okay, cool, we got this thing, and it's cool. They're all cool. They sounded cool, and I think we did a good job. And you know, I'm happy with the way. I was skeptical of the way it turned out because it's different. But now looking back at it, sometimes it takes me a while. Like when I'm done with a project, it takes me like a good 6 months to really like stop, don't listen to it, and then come back to it and be like, okay, that's better than I remember. So, but yeah, I think it has to. I think it has to be honest. You know, it gets back to what we were talking about last time, just the honesty of it. You know, like sometimes when you overthink it or overanalyze it, it kills the creativity and the vibe on it for sure. Guilty for sure of that. Right.
Well, and you pointed out a really good point right there, that we all have this idea of how it's going to sound. You ever remember do you remember like the first time that you heard yourself recorded?
Oh,
like you hear playback and you're like,
it's awful.
God, that's what I sound like.
Yeah. I still say
it's not what it sounds like in here, man. It sounds so different. And I think that's that with my wife, that she just finished this song. And I think I honestly, so we had major snafu, right? So I had a nicer mic. It wasn't a great mic, but I had the AKG-P 820 as $1,000 mic. You know, it was not a bad mic.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing fancy, nothing vintage.
Right.
But we were getting ready to record, and like those shops are all still really don't have stock here right now, because in Vietnam, how you get a mic, how they bring in the stuff from overseas was they flew it in. All the people would fly to the US, pick up the stuff, and they fly it back. So right now, the supply of Newmans and of all the higher end mics, it's low right now. Mm-hmm. You can get stuff secondhand, but I don't want to be buying a mic secondhand because I just don't know what happened, you know? And I had a really cheap backup $150 mic. And that's all that we had. And so when our main mic went out, I was like, dude, in my home studio, I had nothing. And I was just like, I don't know about this, but I was like, we can try. And it turned out okay. My point being, like, but when I was going to listen to it, I was terrified. My wife was really, had a lot riding on this. And it was really an important song. And she released it, and already people are saying that it's her new, like, this might be the new thing that defines her music career. Like, this is her new piece. And I was just like, oh my God.
It's her new vocal sound. It's her new vocal sound.
If they could have seen me just trying to capture this, like, oh God.
I love that. I love the idea of, it kind of fits with getting outside your comfort zone in your box. Like, I'm a huge fan of blind taste tests. And whether it be actual tasting of things or listening to things. So I did this thing years ago. It was like a blind taste test for mic pre's, and I was this was years ago. I was putting together my studio, and of course, like, I'd been working in studios, and I knew all the good ones, like the Neve 1073 and the 1081 and the API and this SSL and blah 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 blah. Right. So I was like, I'm going to do this blind taste test CD thing. I bought this CD, and it was great. And you were supposed to just listen to it and not know what you were listening to, but just comment on what you liked. And it was very consistent. I liked the API 512 mic pre. Mm-hmm. I liked the Neve 1073 mic pre. And then there was this third mic pre that I kept going back to that I absolutely was like, this sounds really good. I really like the way this sounds. And so, of course I didn't know that while I was doing it. And then when I went to unveil what I was listening to the API 512, the Neve, and of course over here was the Mackie Onyx mic pre, which is like mind blowing to me because Mackie is like, so it's like not something that you build your studio around, right? A Mackie. Right. So I was like, well, shit, but I was like,
it's okay. I took us way over the line earlier in the episode.
I was like, I just took this blind taste test and I did it like they do it several times so that you can get a good test, a good like sample. Yeah, it's like a good sample. And I was like, every time I came back to these three, here's a $3,000 mic pre, a vintage $10,000 mic pre, and then I've got this $300 mic pre over here that I like, and I'm like, that's it. I mean, there is no truer test. Like if somebody said to me, go buy the Mackie Onyx mic pre, you're gonna love it, I'd be like, Mackie, I don't know. But when you don't know what it is and you still like it. So I went out and I bought a Mackie. I went out and bought the Mackie 8 mic pre thing. It was like, $800 for 4 of these things. And I was like, this is cool. This works. I like the way they sound. I don't know why. I just do. So it was interesting. Awesome. I love that. I talk about getting out of your comfort zone.
Right?
Like getting away from what you know.
That's the point. Like, it's so based upon, certainly there's something to be said that there is quality. And you can see and hear quality. But sometimes you don't know. There was this great movie called Bottle Shock. I'm from the Napa Valley. I grew up in the Napa Valley. But Napa Valley now, you go there, it's money. It's, all of that Silicon Valley money has moved up into Napa. And it's money, like it's there's definitely like major classes in the Napa Valley. You are up here or you are here, you know, and it's, you very much feel it. It's, of all the places I've lived, it's the place that I felt the distinction between the class levels in the US the most. Like, it's pretty dramatic. It didn't used to be that way. It used to be like this little countryside area where there's a bunch of hicks, you know, a bunch of Northern California farmers that loved wine, and they were doing it. And in the middle movie Bottle Shock, they look at some of the early wineries that were making good wine, and there was this thing where they challenged. They had this blind taste test where they, in France, where some of these American wines came over, and they just kicked the butts of the French wine, and consistently, and like it was done by French wine critics, you know, like that were doing the taste test, and they were shocked that all these American wines were winning, and they just were dramatically winning. It was, you know, the one that's like that was just took home all the honors was the Chateau Montelena Chardonnay, and that's one of the most beautiful wineries in the valley, but it's a phenomenal tasting wine. And you know, in what happened, and it was like the people from Chateau Montelena were like waiting out back in their cowboy boots and like jeans and
right,
you know. But it was about getting outside the comfort, and it really shook it up. It shook up the world's wine scene for a long time. This fact that these country bumpkins in America could be like defeating the establishment in France, you know. Very dramatic.
Yeah. I love it. I like the idea of taking the labels off things and just seeing what works. You know, in my world, I'm constantly doing that, and I guess that's kind of my way of getting out of my comfort zone. Is like, you know, yeah, let's try it. If it's great, it's great. I mean, if I think it's great, you might not think it's great, or somebody else might think it's great. But if I think it's great, then it's great. You know, so
right.
Let's not. Yeah, that was a really eye-opening experience for me. I was like, that's really interesting. Like, you know, take the label off. It's still quality. There's still quality there. It's still really good. It's just got this. It's just being made by this company that would be considered like, you know, affordable and cheaper. And there's a new company that's the same way. And I try not to like judge the book by the cover, I guess. You know, to use that phrase, like, get in there and read it. Is it good? Like, don't, you know, there's this one other company called Warm Audio. They make like,
I know Warm Audio.
knock off vintage stuff. Some of their stuff is great. It's amazing. Some of their stuff sounds really good. Like when you A/B it against things, you know, that would be, you know, hundreds of times more expensive. It's like, is the difference between what you're hearing equated in the price? You know what I'm saying? Like the quality is like, we're like here, like as far as like differences, but price we're like light years apart, you know? So it's amazing.
Know, one of the greatest examples, like things that I absolutely love that cracks me up was the great Japanese rebranding of the auto industry in the 80s and 90s, because Toyota, Nissan, and Honda could not make inroads in the U.S. market. And in their home markets, in the U.S. market, these were looked as cheap, like small cars, right? Mm-hmm. But, you know, in Japan, like Honda was making luxury cars and mid-range cars and sports cars and everything. You know, they made the whole, you know, the whole spectrum. Same thing with Nissan. Same thing with Toyota. So suddenly along came the brands Acura, Infiniti, and Lexus. And Americans ate them up. Like, wow, look at these new car brands. These are amazing. Nothing changed. You know, like the LS something. The Toyota was the Toyota Altezza. The Lexus LS300 or something was a Toyota Altezza. And Europe has done essentially the same thing, you know, like Volkswagen, Audi, and Porsche. You know, they're the same, you know, like you have the Volkswagen Touareg and the Audi Q4 or something and the Porsche Cayenne. They're the same car. They're the same car. They just have different packages to them, you know? Literally, like the Volkswagen Touareg is the same car as the Porsche Cayenne. Just different, setups. The Porsche has a bigger engine, but it's the same car, but yet people were like, oh, I have the Porsche.
Right. Exactly. And the thing is like, with what I do is like in the mix, are you going to hear the difference? And it's like with that analogy, it's like driving to work every day on your daily grind to work. Are you going to notice the difference? Whether or not the logo is different on the dashboard or on the center of the steering column, it's like the car is the car. Well? Yeah. Is it comfortable? Does it get you where you need to go? Is it comfortable? Does it work? Is it, it's the same thing. I'm like, man, when you layer, we got this vocal all by itself, the difference is negligible. When you start layering 48 tracks of music behind it, that's even going to get more negligible once it gets compressed and EQ'd and buried under guitars. It's like
just make something you enjoy.
Yeah, like I always tell like young engineers who are getting started, they're always like, should I get this? And blah, blah. I'm like, just listen to things. People, it's the same thing with studio monitors. Like I've had the same set of studio monitors forever, and people are like, you should get this, or you should get these, or you should do these, or you should do these. And I do have my favorites, and there are certain ones that I like in particular, but it's really what you're used to. It's really what you're familiar with. Like I'm always because I'm like, look, don't be so worried about chasing the latest greatest. Just find something that sounds good to you and work with it for a long time. And then you'll start to understand like why people like NS10s. Are NS10s a great sounding monitor? Not really. By all standards. Are they people comfortable with them? Are they familiar with them? Do they know how to get something out of them? And it's like, yeah. So it's just interesting, like trying to understand that like you don't have to always like just listen, use your ears. Don't go with the labels. Don't go with what you've heard. Don't, just because somebody over here is using this particular thing and getting good results out of it doesn't mean that you can't get the same good results out of something else that's maybe more in your price range or maybe a little bit more in your style and in your idiom that you're working in or whatever it is that you might be doing. So I'm like, don't go into debt. Like everybody's like, like please don't spend a ton of money going to debt. Get something that works for what you're trying to do and get stuff that's you're happy with and just go forward, because it's not really going to impact the outcome of what you're doing as dramatically as it's going to impact you financially.
Right. Well, and you got to know how to use it well. Like I have the cameras I shot my wife's last music video on. I've been having my friends give me feedback like, this is the most beautiful thing you've shot yet, Sean. And I was like, it's a $500 camera. Mm-hmm. I have two of them. I didn't use my expensive cameras. I have nicer cameras, but I used my cheap cameras. Why? Because I could get double the footage at the same time. It shoots nice quality, but I know how to use that camera really well. Mm-hmm. It's something I've had forever, but I still like it. Yep. And because I know how to use it well, it is something that I can pull out of my, just boom. I can do it second nature, and I know I'm not going to mess up because I know how to use it. There was coming up as in judo. I remember training with some of these judoka from Japan, and we at my dojo we learned all these techniques. We had so many, and my teacher loved to collect techniques, and we had all of them. And I knew how to, if a guy tried to throw me and then I could throw him back from the middle of that throw. And I met these guys from Japan and I was like, do you know all these throws? Like, no, I know 5. I was like, 5 throws. And we were going to go, we were going to train opposite each other. And so we did a little bit of sparring, like to throw each other on the ground. He planted me on the ground multiple times, again and again and again, with the same damn throw. And I knew it was coming. You know what? I was like, afterwards we sat down and I talked. And he's like, you train 100 different throws. And you train each one of them this much. He's like, I trained that one throw 1,000,000 times. And it's like, I don't care who you are. You give me 20 seconds and I'll land it. Mm-hmm. Because he knew the thing that he needed to do so well. And he was so good at it. And I think that that would be something that, like, for any type of professional coming up, like whether you're a cameraman or an audio engineer, know your stuff. Mm-hmm. You don't have to know a lot, but what you do need to know, you know it well, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I always say that. It's like I've seen people, I know people who can take incredible photos with their iPhone,
right?
You know, and it's like, it's what's here more than what's in your hand, you know. And I know guitar players that get incredible tone out of cheap guitars, and it's like
Bruce Springsteen.
Yeah, it's like the tone is here. 90% of the tone is in your hands. Yeah. 90% of that picture is in your eye. The lens, yeah. I mean, you can debate that, and I'm sure that I'm wrong, and there'll be 100,000 people who say you're totally wrong. But I don't believe that. I believe that you can do great things with minimal if you have the eye for it, or you have the ear for it, or you have the technique correct on it.
You could reinforce that exact statement by pointing out that if you have a great camera, someone can still not know how to take a photo.
Yeah.
You know, you have great recording gear, you can still have a horrible mix, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's true. I mean, it's so true. And so I'm a firm believer of that. And I'm just like, this one person in particular, I'm just always really inspired by their photos. And they kind of have made it their thing that they take their photos on their iPhone. And it's like, but they're so good. They look so good. And
right.
It's not so much the way it's the image, not the way it's being captured. And so,
yeah,
you know, there's some level of like, obviously I think if you took those images and you blew them up like to poster size or even bigger, there might be some limiting to the ability to expand that image because of the quality of the camera. But the artistic statement is still really amazing, more so amazing than people I see with, you know, the big hotshot cameras, you know. And I always like to keep that in mind.
Ansel Adams was essentially taking pictures of Yellowstone on a wooden box with a lens on it.
Yeah, right. Exactly. That's what I'm saying. So I like that. I like that kind of underdog approach to things. You know, I think it's a much cooler way to go. And I've heard some great records made on some very limited gear, and I'm just like, wow, this is phenomenal. Like, this sounds phenomenal. Like, you nailed it, you know, like whoever it is that's doing it. And I always really appreciate that so much, because I'm like, you know, you did this with like a 1/4-inch machine and a drum machine and like a 58, an SM58. And it's like, damn, like I like, that's amazing. Like, you're amazing, right. You know? Right. I really think it adds so much to it. And what was great is that they were able to do it with zero hindrance to their process, because it's what they had, it's what they're familiar with. And, you know, I know so many people who get this stuff and they're like, man, I got all this stuff, I don't know how to use it. So when I go to sit down and want to create, I'm always stumbling over this or that or this or the other thing. And, you know, this person's in their basement with their 1/4-inch machine, their little 8-track 1/4-inch machine, or their 4-track 1/4-inch machine, a 58, a drum machine, and a keyboard. And they're constantly creating this great stuff, and they're getting incredible recordings out of it. And it's always like really eye-opening to me, how sometimes it's too much. It's too much, you know, just go with what you know. You know, if you're comfortable with that, it sounds great. Like, I did this project, this guy, man, he is awesome. Great guitar player, incredible singer, actually a really good drummer. He played everything on the record, and he did it on a Tascam 8-track 1/4-inch machine. And I got the tracks to mix it. And I was like, this sounds phenomenal. Like, where'd you track this? He's like, I tracked this at a cabin in the woods. And he's like, I did it all by myself. I was like, I played the drum part, then I went back and I played the bass, then I played all the guitars, and I sang all the vocals. And I'm like, you got to be shitting me. Like, are you kidding me? This sounds amazing. And he did it with like a 58, a little mic pre, you know, nothing fancy, a compressor, and this tape machine. And it was like probably the coolest sounding and one of the better sounding projects I had worked on like that whole year. And it was 8 tracks. That was even more beautiful, is that the drums were like, you know, kick, snare, hat, 2 guitars, bass, and a vocal. It was it. It was like very limited, but also it was so big sounding because there wasn't so much there. It was like very limited in what he was able to do, but it created so much space in the music that everything got to be so big that it created this like massive sound. And I was like, wow, you know, I'm almost afraid I'm going to screw this up with all my stuff I have in my studio. Right. Like, I really had to, again, get outside my comfort and just be really simple about it. I'm like, these tracks sound really good. I'm just going to kind of level them out first before I start trying to EQ and compress them. And I used very little outboard gear, very little mixing, you know, EQ and compression, a little EQ on the vocal to kind of bring it forward, and then some you know, EQ and compression on the entire mix. But man, it was spot on. And it was because this guy had this gear for a decade, and he just really knew how to like squeeze everything out of it. And it was just so cool and really inspiring, man.
I was like, how to use it, man.
Yeah, I was like, this is really cool, man. It's like, this is really, really cool.
It brings us back as we start winding down, you know, like it brings us back to what you're talking about with that band, about them playing Broadway, you know, every week. It's about refining that. It's about Barbra Streisand's 10,000 hours, you know, or whatever, how many 1,000 hours she has now. That there is that practice that is so pivotal to becoming great at whatever you're doing. And it's not necessary to have, sure, it's nice to have lots of toys. God knows I would love to have more toys. What am I going to pull from today, you know? I mean, and granted, like, I think it is also about knowing your tools, you know, like different cameras have different color palettes, different lenses look a certain way. There are different tools that are nice to be able to have, but the process doesn't necessarily change. You know, you still have to be good at what you're doing.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like, I love that movie, the Blair Witch Project. When that came out, I loved that. Right. It was like shot on like VHS, and it was so, you know, they really played up. They just played, they're like, this is how we're doing it. We got like zero budget. We're going to do this on VHS, but we're going to make it like these kids are, you know, documenting this thing and make it kind of like this documentary style thing, which obviously it's not. It's a fiction piece, but the way that it was done was so smart and so clever. And they really were like, we have a limited capacity here to do what we're doing, so let's be smart about it, and let's figure out a way to really make this work to our advantage and how to get what we need out of it. And it's just always like really inspiring when I see people do that. It's like, I want to be you.
Highest grossing movie in history from amount spent to the return. It's really? The highest grossing. Yeah. The smallest budget for the highest return. I think they made like $500 million on that movie.
Oh wow!
And it was the budget was like $50,000. Which for a movie is insanely small, you know. That's crazy. But, man, I have again appreciated our conversation today.
Oh yeah, great, thanks for having me.
Yeah, man. You are definitely invited back anytime you want to come on and talk about weird things.
Awesome. Yeah, if I got any new weird things, I'll let you know.
That's awesome.